I said, Doc, this is not right. So your brain and nervous system's not down regulated. I said, you shouldn't be doing high intensity interval training right now because it's too intense for you. You can't down regulate. Let's get your brain and nervous system to regulate properly first, and then you can go back to that, right? So I need you to stop doing that. I need you to do yoga. I need you to do Tai Chi, stuff that's going to help your nervous system down regulate. He said, no, I'm fine. I'm healthy. Everything's fine, right? I see him a year later at another conference. I said, Doc, did you make any of those changes? He said, no. 3 weeks later, we found out he died of a heart attack in the middle of a workout.
So kick them rocks. If you don't like how I talk, I'ma keep on talking and walk my walk. Let the haters talk, let the rumors fly. I ain't got time to wonder why. The good Lord knows the man I am, and I'll die standing tall with a mic in my hand. You can kick rocks if you don't like how I talk. I'ma keep on talking and walk my walk.
Hey everybody, Dr. Baker here. Welcome to Rip It. Hey, purpose of this podcast is to pour innate into chiropractors on a regular basis to keep everybody excited about what we do because we have the greatest job in the world. With me today, I got Dr. Clint Steele, a friend of mine. I saw this guy speak on stage one time. He was on fire. I love listening to him. And he's got some cool services, products that he's used or created for chiropractors to be able to really connect neurology and chiropractic and help patients get better results. Doc, welcome to the show. I'm super glad you're here.
Well, I appreciate you having me, man. I love what you're doing. I love the name too. Rip It, man. Let's rip it, brother.
Hey man, how'd you get into chiropractic? I was asked, like, was it some miracle adjustment? Was it just something you fell into? Like, how'd you get here?
Man, it was odd because when I started school, like everybody had this amazing story, right? This was in the 90s. And I didn't have it. I had never even been adjusted. And I decided to go become a chiropractor. So my story was I was playing college football. And as a freshman, I wasn't playing much. And I remember like I was going to school for physical education. I was going to be a gym teacher, right? Same thing with all the other football players at the time. And I wasn't getting much playing time. So I went to the coach and I said, Coach, like, what do I need to do? Like, he says, you got to get in the gym. I said, I'm in the gym. I'm eating right. All this stuff, right? He says, well, I'll have the captain come talk to you. Captain came to talk to me and he says, we got to get you on steroids. Basically, that's what the coach was telling me to do, to go on steroids. And I'm like, first off, I'm not going on steroids. Secondly, I don't even know, like, how would I even get it if I wanted to? And they're like, oh, a local medical doctor is giving it to our team. And I'm like, that's crazy to me. Like that turned me off really a lot. My dad was seeing a chiropractor at the time, was, for back pain, was getting results there. But one day I was walking down the hallway with my buddy who was also going to school to become a phys ed teacher. And he says, dude, let's do something different. Let's become doctors or something. I'm like, okay. So I said, all right. I started talking to my dad's chiropractor. He says, this is the life, man. It's amazing. I talked to a couple medical doctors at the time. They said, don't do this, man. It's the pain, whatever. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this. So get this. I was at the gym and we used to see this guy down there. He's Dr. Jim Hoven. I don't know if you know him. He's a chiropractor in Colorado. I'd seen him dozens and dozens of times at the gym. Never spoke a word to him, right? For some reason, one day we struck up a conversation. He says, I'm leaving tomorrow for chiropractic school. I said, really? I said, I'm thinking of actually going to become a chiropractor. He says, well, give me your address. I'll bring you some stuff over tonight. I'm like, dude, yeah, right. Give me a break. We live in Denver, Colorado. This is not like a small town, right? We're Denver, Colorado. He shows up that night with all this information from Logan College. And next thing I know, I'm going for a visit. And that was me, man.
I don't believe in coincidence. That was totally a God thing. That was an innate thing that you randomly talked to some guy that got you hooked up. Who was one of your mentors? Who is somebody that, because obviously at some point we've all had somebody pour into us. At some point there was somebody in our path that we looked up to. Who's one of those chiropractors that either kind of took you under their wing or you used to go shadow their office or you saw, man, that's what chiropractic really is?
So for me, it was none of those, the shadowing, the in-person, stuff. It was more at a distance type stuff. So what happened for me was, and I don't know if we'll get into my story, I'll share here real quick, for 17 years, I graduated from Logan. We were told at Logan, all the stories, the chiropractic adjustment is amazing. And yet you get out, you put your sign up and you have people coming in that, Doc, just take care of my neck and low back pain, right? Just take care of and I'm like, wait a second, like I was going to change the world through chiropractic. And yet all these people just want me to take care of neck and low back pain. Like something's wrong. So 17 years go by. I had 7,000 patient files and I still needed more new patients to pay the bills. Most of those people were inactive because I took care of their neck and low back pain in 4, 5, 6, 7 visits, and then they were gone. I didn't get it. I didn't understand how to explain the truth behind chiropractic and for them to get it. And so after 17 years, I quit. I said, I'm done. I'm never going to do this again. I'm burnt out. Right.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Hold on. Every time I interview people, they always do the same thing you just did. Oh, 17 years goes by. Dude, 17 years is a long time to what it sounds like not be that stoked about what you're doing. Like, we got to sit on that for just a second, because there's going to be some chiropractor listening to this. There's going to be a student that went to some crap chiropractic school and doesn't even think that subluxation is a real thing. Someone's got to hear a little bit more of that story. So we have plenty of time. I'm going to unpack it a little bit, but 17 years, give me a little bit more on that. Like, are you coming home from work every day just feeling like you're wasting your time? Does money suck? Are you guys stressed about finances because the practice is so small? Do you feel like you're constantly trying to sell something to someone that doesn't want something? Like, what's that like?
Well, I think it was a little bit of a combination of the things. I think at a foundational, and I come across docs like this all the time, right? At foundational, I needed to make the money, right? I had, when I opened up, I had just gotten married. I just had my first son. Like I needed to make the money to take care of my family, right? And so it was almost like I was stuck. I remember always thinking, man, I'm stuck. I don't want to be stuck anymore, but yet I didn't have any other way out, right? And so I continued to practice. I wasn't struggling. I mean, I was seeing, 130, 140 a week. So I wasn't struggling, but the big stressor for me was fighting with the insurance companies, number one. Number two, it was constantly having to need more new patients. That's the part that really killed me, because I would have a patient come in and I'm like, oh man, I've got this patient for life, right? They're going to get it and they're going to be with me. And, sure enough, 10 visits, 11 visits, 12 visits later, they were out the door and they loved me. They loved me because I took care of their neck and low back pain, but I didn't love myself because I knew chiropractic was about so much more, but it just never connected for me. Right. So I think it was a combination of all that. And finally, I hit my breaking point right after 17 years. I said, I can't do this anymore, man. Like, my health was suffering. I was depressed. It was just, I'm done. Never going to do this again, ever. So I walked away.
I want to make a point here. That's 17 years of helping people, 17 years of people coming in with a problem. They see you, you lay hands on them, they get better, and they leave better than they were. And in their mind, you've fixed every problem that they had. I, at points in my career, have been and still am frustrated with the medical system and with medical doctors, because I just can't stand it when they give patients no hope, or they have to be on drugs their entire life, or whatever it is. But I feel bad for medical doctors, and I say this quite a bit. Can you imagine 17 years of not people leaving better, but 17 years and the patients don't leave, right? Because they've been so trained to stay, but every year your patient comes back, they're freaking worse. And you have to put them on another drug and they have another symptom. Like that's got to be way more depressing than what you had to go through.
Oh, 100%. My focus was on the wrong thing. Absolutely. And, after I quit, I've talked to other docs and they said, well, how do you know you didn't help these people with their sleep problems or with other problems? They just didn't connect it to, right? And I didn't connect them either because I wasn't asking the questions. And so, I saw it as a PVA of 12 and, having to constantly find new patients, which is not what I wanted. I wanted a lifetime wellness-based practice, So, to your point, I was focused on the wrong things 100%, and it could have been way worse. And maybe that's why I lasted 17 years, but I hit my breaking point. I said, I'm done. I know there's more to health and more to chiropractic than this, but I can't figure it out. So I'm done. And so get back to your question about who was my mentor. What happened was I got out and, I started selling, believe it or not. And this is kind of why I was stuck, is because with a chiropractic degree, you can't really do a whole lot, right? It's not like a business degree, it's a chiropractic degree. And so you either practice chiropractic or you get into teaching or whatever. And so I couldn't find anything. So in order to make ends meet, I started selling Kirby vacuum cleaners door to door. So talk about depressing and talk about going from one level to the next. Not there's anything wrong with, selling Kirby vacuum cleaners, but it was embarrassing calling my family and friends and saying, hey, you okay if I come demonstrate this Kirby vacuum cleaner to you? And they're like, wait, what are you talking about? I thought you were a doctor. I thought you had what are you talking about? Right. And so it was embarrassing. But the thing is, I was actually quite good at it. and I ended up making a little bit of money, enough to survive. But what I learned from selling Kirby vacuum cleaners was irreplaceable when I got back into chiropractic, right? And the impetus that put me back in was my grandmother sending me a letter. It was 6 pages, it was 6 pages total. But the line that I recall is, "I'm ashamed of you and you should be ashamed of yourself for not limiting your potential." I hated my grandmother for about 5 days. I remember I was so pissed at her. I told my wife, "Who does she think she is? What is this?" And then on the fifth day or sixth day, I woke up and I'm like, she's right. Like, I'm not living to my potential. So at the time, I was listening to Dr. Dan Sullivan. He doesn't practice anymore. In fact, I think he used to coach chiropractors, but he was in the kind of the brain space of chiropractic.
I know who.
Okay. And so he had done a number of things. And so I was listening to him and I'm like, yeah, like this is what it's about. Like, it's about the brain. It's about like your brain coordinates. Like, he really opened my eyes to some stuff. And then I started following Dr. Chris Zano, who at the time I had never met any of these docs, right? Later on, I met him obviously and did some work with him, but Dr. Chris Zano was killing it. And I'm like, holy crap, like this guy's like doing amazing. And then lo and behold, a guy named Dr. Richard Barwell came into my life as well. He had been, following me and doing some stuff as we started helping docs go from pain to brain. And as my practice exploded, because I got back into practice and basically 100% cash, right? I said, no more insurance. And I said, minimum, these people are going to come in, they're going to accept a 6-month care plan. I'm going to focus on the brain. And what I did was I went from 0 to 500 patient visits a week in 6 months, 100% cash. And I started seeing anxiety and depression. And eventually that led to dementia being reversed, like all these amazing things, which is what I knew chiropractic was about. So that's kind of the long of the short of it. But to answer your question, three main guys, I think: Dr. Dan Sullivan, Dr. Chris Zano, and Dr. Richard Barwell.
I have about 16 points I got to pick out of that, right? So at the time, I know that at one point in time, Chris Zano's seeing 2,000 a week. He's not doing that anymore that I know of. But at the time, you're seeing that and you're seeing what volume could be like. And I think that in order to go from 0 to 500 a week in 6 months, there has to be some seed planted that's a possibility. Because I think you have to see, for your brain to start attaching to those things and really start believing that that's a reality, because our abilities will never surpass our vision or what we think is capable. Yeah. So you went from 150, which no knock anybody seeing 150 a week, but that's not 500 a week. There's a radical jump there. That had to be something that got planted. So how did that come about? I mean, did you go to his office? Did you see him just talking about it online?
I heard about it. I think I'd seen maybe a couple of videos he had done or something like that. I had heard about it. There was also another practice that I visited down in Atlanta, and they gave me a tour of their practice and they told me their numbers, what they were doing. So that kind of opened my eyes. Dr. Chris Zano opened my eyes. Dan Sullivan opened my eyes to that. Because I remember at the end of my 17-year pain-based practice, right? I remember thinking to myself, man, wouldn't it be amazing if people just came in, like they just paid me every month, saw them regularly throughout that month, once a week or whatever it was, and they didn't care about insurance. And then I would quickly say, oh, that's impossible. People won't do that, right? And yet it was my own limit in my own head, right? Because once I saw that other doctors were doing that, I'm like, wait a second, if they can do that, I can do this. That's what I did. And I think the other thing was focusing on the brain, really, really moving from the subluxation model or the pain model to a brain model really opened my eyes when I came back to, and I explained to patients, I simply asked them the question, what coordinates every function in your body, right? And they said, well, my brain. So I said, if your brain's not functioning properly, could it cause health problems, right? And then later on, we saw the research from Dr. Barwell, Dr. Heidi Havoc coming out about how the chiropractic changes brain function. And now it just like kind of all set. It all made sense to me. And I think that was a big piece of it too.
I want to come back to that because I still explain it like this to patients on day one. I say, listen, if I cut the nerve to something, it's dead. I put pressure on your nervous system. Your brain can't talk to your heart. Over time, is it going to get healthy or sick? They say sick. I say, right, well, there's two reasons why there's pressure. The area is stuck and not moving, or it's a structural problem. And I get that is not the most philosophically the most scientifically sound explanation, but that's something that really has landed with patients. And I've started thousands of people under care and had good wellness base and vitality practices with that foundation. But to be super honest, I started looking into Heidi Havoc's work and looking into this other stuff. And every time that I look at something like how a subluxation affects the afferent input to the brain, therefore affecting the way that the brain is able to regulate the rest of the autonomic function, that's the reason why organs do not speed up. And if they're not speeding up or slowing down properly, then you're going to have a symptom eventually. That kind of stuff still excites the heck out of me. And I go in and tell my team about it, and I'm telling patients about it. So I want to dive into that for a minute. I want to sit on this neurology aspect and then come back to this 0 to 500 and like really break down the bones of that, because I want a chiropractor who's listening that doesn't really know how to explain chiropractic to have a few nuggets that they could use, right? And then get excited about the neurology. And when I lay hands on someone and I move a bone, it's crazy what happens without me having to do anything but where's it stuck and move it. And then it moves. And let's talk about that.
What exactly would you like to talk about? The scientific basis of that, or the actual laying hands on someone and seeing what would you like to talk about?
I want to start with the scientific basis of it. I want to use the proper terminology. I want to talk like we're talking to doctors that they want to go into practice and have more certainty, and maybe they don't know how to craft the explanation. Listen, when I got out of school, I listened to James Chestnut all the time. I listened to his stuff on repeat because I liked the way he explained chiropractic, and I wanted to be able to, just got to grab a nugget here and there. So if someone can grab 2 or 3 nuggets out of this next 5 minutes of our conversation, I think it's worth them listening to this podcast.
Here's what I'd like to do then. I think I want to explain this from a scientific standpoint, but then what I want to do is the scientific standpoint's not going to connect with the patient. So then I want to put it in layman's terms so you can simplify this and you can very easily get a patient to understand this. Okay?
Let's do it.
All right. So from a chiropractic standpoint, from a science standpoint, a couple of things you got to understand, and there's been research to prove this, is if you think about feedback to the brain, right? Every part of our body has feedback to the brain. If we break this down into, and all chiropractors know this terminology, mechanoreceptors or Golgi tendon muscle fibers, right? The highest percentage of Golgi muscle tendon fibers per ounce of body weight happens, number 1, in the eyes, okay? Number 2, in the cervical spine and along the spine, okay? So what that means is, and you think about these muscles, right? They're super small. Right? They're super small, but yet most of that muscle, like a high percentage of that muscle, is communicate as compared to your lats or your traps, right? We're a big muscle, but only a very small percentage is actually communicating to the brain. And the reason that's so important is because what we see is that those muscle tendon fibers are basically the ones I'm just talking about here, have to do with your parasympathetic nervous system. Right? When you can't see properly, that stresses out your brain, right? And the muscles I'm talking about in the eyes really are peripheral vision, right? Being able to move your eyes back and forth. And if you've seen it, there's a lot of research on what happens to your autonomic nervous system when you just move your eyes laterally. We see a decrease in blood pressure. We see a decrease in cortisol levels just by doing that. So the question is why? Well, it's because we have now more input to the brain. The better the input is to the brain, the more the brain can move away from survival mode and say, wait a second, I'm safe. Like I'm happy. I can move into what I call thrival mode or healing mode, which is parasympathetic nervous system, right? And so same thing with the muscles and ligaments along our spine, right? They're smaller muscles, but yet they provide a ton of feedback to the brain. And so when the brain is getting that feedback, the brain says, okay, everything's safe. I know what's going on in my body. I feel safe. Everything's good. I can move into the healing mode. But when that joint's not moving properly, that means that feedback to the brain is not happening. And that's one of the reasons why the chiropractic adjustment is so powerful, and movement of the spine in general is so important, right? But specifically, every single one of those segments, when we provide the input to that segment, now we've got the communication back to the brain, and the brain says, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I like this. Now I can stop worrying about what's going on in my spine. I can stop worrying about what's going on there, and I can feel safe, and I know what's happening. And now I can move into thrival mode or healing mode. That makes sense? That's just one portion, but
makes perfect sense.
So from a patient standpoint, then what we want to do is we want to start off. And I always tell docs, listen, if your intake is all about pain, you are missing the boat. Okay. And you know the intakes that I'm talking about, doc, right? The ones that have the picture of the human frame and put an X where your pain is and rate your pain, right? And I'm not saying not to see pain patients, but don't. And the perfect example is this. I was helping a doc out in Salt Lake City one day, and we were moving him from a pain-based practice to a brain-based practice. And I happened to be in his office. Very first patient was coming in. This lady went to his church. She was having severe anxiety, wants to come in. Okay, fine. We're in the back. She's filling out her intake form. We're in the back. And all of a sudden you can hear her yell. The office was closed, so you can hear her yell, "Hey, doc, no place on this intake form for me to put that I'm having anxiety. It's all about pain." She says, "I don't have pain." And that's a perfect example, right? So she's thinking if she was coming in for anxiety and it's all about pain, like, I'm in the wrong place. You know what I mean? So let's move away from that, number one. Number two, the intake form has to have a list of other conditions. Now, most docs have this, but they don't use it properly. Okay. If you don't have it, you got to get it. And if you aren't using it properly, then follow along. Because here's what we want to do. Most docs have patients, and I come across this all the time. I would say, maybe I would like your guess on this. What percentage of chiropractors are focused on pain to the point where that's basically all they attract is pain patients? So what would you say? Oh, I say way higher than that, but let's use 70%. So majority of these patients are coming in for pain, right? We got to change their mindset that I'm seeing this doctor for pain to, wait a second, I'm seeing this doctor for the brain. And so what we've got to do is we take their pain, we look at it 100%, but now what we've got to do is we've got to connect that to their anxiety problem or their sleep problem or their digestive problem or their high blood pressure, whatever else they're coming in with, right? Most docs never connect the two. And the way we connect it is by starting with the very simple question. Let me ask you, Mrs. Jones, what coordinates every function in your body? Do you know? They're going to say brain. Now, once in a while they say heart, once in a while they say thyroid. There's a workaround for that. But once they understand that, wait a second, my brain coordinates every function in my body. So, Mrs. Jones, if your brain's not functioning properly, could it cause pain problems? Could it affect your brain's ability or your body's ability to heal your back pain or your neck pain? In addition, if your brain's not communicating with your heart, could you have high blood pressure? Could you have anxiety issues? And we go through something called a fire alarm analogy to explain that, right? And if you want, we can go through that. It's very simple. It takes 2 minutes, but it really, when I get done with that fire alarm analogy, I have so many people that say to me, wow, no one ever explained this to me like this before. I had no idea, and they're like, wow, this makes so much sense, right? Because now we've connected everything to their brain not functioning properly.
It is amazing to me, even when I connect a subluxation in their low back to potential digestive issues, and I look at a woman and tell her that's the reason why she's only having one bowel movement every couple of days. It's like some secret that just got unlocked or out of the, like, it blows my mind to this day, 15 years into practice, that more people do not understand. And I think that chiropractors blow past that. Like you're saying, they're so focused on what the person wants that's the reason why the person never gets what they need.
I agree, brother.
Take me to this 0 to 500 in 6 months, because I don't care who you are. I don't care how long you've been in practice. That's a major jump. And I really want to know, like, what was the marketing like? How often are you asking for referrals? What's the in-office process look like? Because again, there's chiropractors listening to this that are like, bullshit, 500 a week and 6. They don't think that's even a thing. Even though I've had multiple guests on the show that have done exactly that or done it in a different way, but there's always some little nuance that someone's going to hear and go, oh, I'm not doing that. I got to add that.
Yeah. So here's the thing too. I didn't throw in this, as I was selling Kirby vacuum cleaners, like I was completely broke. So when I went from selling Kirby vacuum cleaners to opening up my office, I had no money. So there was no marketing budget. The marketing budget was me going out and talking to people, and I'll tell you how I did that. The other thing I want to point out too is I didn't have any employees. It was me. It was only me in the office going from 0 to 500 patient visits a week in 6 months. Okay.
So assistants even at 100 or 200 a week?
No one. I was the only one in the office. Yep.
That's the crazier part.
So what happened was I knew I wanted to move to the brain. Again, my influence from Dr. Sullivan. At the time I hadn't met Dr. Barwell. I didn't even know he existed. So that came on a little bit later, but I knew of Dr. Sullivan, and I know this is about the brain. So I'm going to make it about the brain. And so what I did was I said, listen, I don't have a marketing budget. So I've got to go out and meet people. And so I set a goal. I figured out how many people I would have to talk to, invite them to my office for an assessment, the whole thing. And so I told my older son, I said, you're going to be in my accountability. Like, I don't care if you respond to me or not, but basically I'm going to put together 6 sheets of paper. So you're going to be 100 names on there. I'm going to meet 100 people every single month for the next 6 months. At the end of the month, I'm going to send you the sheet and, just have the accountability, right? So I started off month one. I went out and met 100 people, networking meetings, going office to office, going to business, whatever. Wrote them all down when I met them. I got to know them. I reached out on social media, met them, or if I had a chance to talk to them, I would talk to them. I would invite them to my office for a free assessment, right? Free assessment. Come in, we'll assess your brain and your nervous system, see how well it's working, and go from there, right? We went about 2.5 months of doing that. And after that, I didn't have to meet any more people because referrals started flooding in, right? And that's the one thing I didn't account for was the referrals. But basically what I did was I went out and I started just meeting people. I started collecting cards. So one of the things I learned, I didn't give out cards, right, to people. They end up in the trash. I ended up getting people's cards, getting people's names. I would talk to them. I did some brain screenings. I remember the very first brain screening I did, it was a cooking show. I heard it on the radio. This is like a month into this thing, right? And I didn't have any money. And I called they said, hey, we're looking for a few more, vendors if you want to come to this cooking show. I'm like, I never heard of it, whatever. So I call them up and say, how much is it? They're like, it's $300. And I'm like, oh my gosh, $300 at the time to me, it was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. It was a 2-hour event. So I said, all right, I'm going to do this. Didn't have any employees. I recruited my 2 sons to come help me. And so basically what happened was I got there, set up the table. Everyone's talking. They're like, get ready, because this is going to flood, right? Which is what you hear at all of them, right? In my pain-based practice, I had done all those. I'd never got any new patients out of it. So I'm like, yeah, whatever. Sure enough, it was a 2-hour event, open up the doors, and a flood of people came in. Like, it was unbelievable. And so we started doing brain assessments with these people. I had a line probably 15 deep. And at the end of that 2 hours, this is the most I'd ever done at the time, because my previous pain-based practice, I never got any new patients out of these events. I had 23 people in the books. I think 18 of them showed up, accepted care. And then that was kind of the start of that. So I met people. I started doing talks. I said, one-on-one isn't going to work. I'm not going to meet enough people, right? And so we started doing events. We started doing talks. We started doing networking meetings, all that. That's how it went.
I think that there's a key piece here. I truly believe that every chiropractor at some point prior to chiropractic school should have at least one, if not 2, sales jobs. I used to sell Cutco knives. I used to sell security systems door to door. I was the recruitment chair of my fraternity, so I had to literally sell guys on joining our house. I sold damn near everything I could figure out how to sell. And I didn't realize at the time what that was doing, but it was creating this skill set that I have where I can engage you in a conversation and I can lead you to a point where it's your idea, but you make a decision that benefits both of us. And that's the definition of a sale.
Here's the thing. I said earlier, thank you for sharing that, man. And that's amazing, because the same thing happened to me with selling Kirby vacuum cleaners.
That's why you were so successful.
And one of the things I remember, to your point, is they would tell us again and again, if it comes out of their mouth, or if it comes out of your mouth, you're selling. If it comes out of their mouth, they're buying, right? And so what I teach docs is, listen, stop talking so much. Stop talking so much. Ask questions, lead them down the path so that they're telling you what it is that you want to tell them, but they're telling you, because when they tell you, they own it. Now it's their idea, right? Now it's them.
No, obviously everything happens for a reason. And I would say, praise the Lord that you actually did sell Kirby vacuums, because when you first told me that, to be honest, what I was going to say to you was you could have just gone back and been a PE teacher, and you had the degree to do so, right? That would have been probably the easiest. And I would argue that if I called up a friend that I hadn't seen since high school and I said, yeah, I decided to become a PE teacher versus I'm out selling Kirby vacuums door to door, I would feel more embarrassed about selling the vacuums.
Yep.
But because you took that route, it forced you to be able to sell something. And most people that had that Kirby vacuum in front of them probably didn't know that they wanted a Kirby vacuum until you walked them through the process of how awesome it was. And there's no different with chiropractic, because so many people have just overlooked chiropractic as nothing but back pain or neck pain. So to your earlier point, their anxiety, their depression, their digestive issue, their thyroid problem, their migraines, all this stuff, their inability to conceive a child has been just way over their head, as the chiropractic being the root, like the solution. That when we start sharing chiropractic with people, they don't even know that they need what we have until we communicate it properly.
That's 100%. That's why after about 2.5 months, I didn't need it. I didn't need to meet any more people because the referrals were coming in. And people always ask me, like, how'd you get so many referrals? Like, how'd you do that? I said, guys, listen, a mom is not going to bring in their 6-year-old child for back pain because their 6-year-old child probably doesn't have back pain, right? But when you get them to understand that they've got a brain problem, and oh, by the way, their kid now who has ADD or focus problems or anxiety problems or depression is probably a brain problem. Their husband who has high blood pressure is probably a brain problem, right? Once they connect the dots and they understand that just from a perspective of, wait a second, your brain coordinates everything. So basically, anyone that has a health problem, first thing you want to do is probably check their brain. Boom. What happens to referrals then? They go through the roof.
Well, the thing I love about this, and I'm going to call it an angle because really it is, and what it is it's a USP, it's a unique selling proposition. And what I mean by that is even functional neurologists, even chiropractors that have a diplomat in neurology, I think do a piss poor job marketing themselves as come get your brain checked. Because even take a step back, we're implementing just some terminology of, it's not even about, have you been checked for subluxation? It's not about, have you had your spine checked? Even that is a new, like, even that could be a USP. But when you go to that next level of, had your brain checked, to your point, everyone wants to know that their brain's okay. So walk me through because originally obviously there was no tech involved. You had no money, right? But you were out talking to everybody in the community, which most chiropractors won't get their asses off their desk chair and go out and actually meet people. So that's problem number one. But number 2 point here is when you're inviting people in and you have no money, no tech, and you're saying, come in for a brain evaluation, real question, walk me through the bones of that. What did that look like then? And then what does it look like now?
Oh, yeah. What it looked like then? Honestly, what it looked like then was I think I was paying $20 a month for a posture screen app. Okay. And I would do their posture, I'd look at a posture screen app, and I would show them. And guys, you just asked the question, how many people come into your practice that have forward head posture? I mean, even 6 and 7-year-olds, right? The majority of them have forward head posture. And so when we focused on what that was doing, or the fact that that's a brain problem, right? It's their brain. And I would bring it back to sympathetic versus parasympathetic. I wouldn't use those terms. I would use fight or flight. I would use what eventually turned into survival mode. Let me ask you, what position is someone going to be in when they're trying to fight for their life, right? What is their head position going to be in, right? And so and they'd say, well, it's going to be like this. I'd say, yeah, because your head is too far forward, that is actually a brain problem. That's a sign that your brain is stuck in survival mode. So again, going back to the fire alarm analogy, which we can go through real quick, that might help some docs to understand this better. But that's really how then everything was connected, right? And so that's where I started.
I think we should go through that. Let's do it.
So you be a patient, and I do this in my workshops all the time. You're coming in with back pain, right? But you also have high blood pressure and you have sleep problems, okay? Just walk through me. So let me ask you first. So you come in, you think you're coming for back pain. We're going to go through back pain stuff. Boom, okay? At that point, I'm going to set aside the intake form. I'm going to say, listen, doc, you've got a lot going on here. What do I do? I just want to set this aside. I'm going to come back to this in a minute, but I want to set this aside and just share with you a little bit more in detail what I do as a brain-based chiropractor. So notice that terminology, brain-based chiropractor. I'm differentiating myself. What I do as a brain-based chiropractor, how I'm different than other chiropractors, or what you think chiropractic might be. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, totally. That's fine.
Awesome. So let's start with a very simple question. What coordinates every function in your body? Do you know?
My brain.
Your brain, absolutely. So let's say, for example, and again, I'm going to bring this back to your symptoms, because what I think is happening with you is there's a brain problem going on here, and I'll share with you why. But let's say, for example, the fire alarm were to go off right now in this building. What do you think would happen to your heart rate?
Probably would go up.
And your breathing rate?
Probably go up.
How about your muscle tension?
I would assume my muscles would get tighter because I got to get the heck out of here.
Yeah. So because why do all those things happen? You just said it.
There's an alarm going off, so I got to respond to that.
You've got to get out, right? You've got to survive. So basically what happened is your brain responded to a stress. In this case, the stress was good. That was the fire alarm saying, hey, we've got to survive. So your brain then changed all physiologic functions so you could survive. That makes sense?
Yep.
We call that survival mode. Now, let's go the other end of the spectrum. Let's say it's a false alarm. We come back into the building 10, 15 minutes later. What should happen to your heart rate now and your respiration rate and your muscle tension now?
Everything probably goes back to more relaxed or back to slower.
Exactly. Question is why?
Because the alarm's not on anymore.
The stress is gone. The stress is left. And now your brain can say, hey, I'm safe. I can move into what we call healing mode. Because understand that in survival mode, you can't heal. Your brain can only heal when it's in healing mode. That makes sense, number one. Number two, understand that your brain doesn't know the difference between a fire alarm stress, a relationship stress, a financial stress, a fear or a worry stress. My kids are driving me bonkers stress. You ever experienced any of those stressors?
Yeah, had a couple of those before.
All of us do every day, right? On a regular basis. So the question is, can your brain recover from those stressors? And so what I think is happening with you, Doc, is this. You have the back pain, right? You're coming in with back pain. We said if your brain is stuck in survival mode, what's that doing to your muscle tension?
Makes it tighter.
Is your brain better able to coordinate the healing of your back pain if your muscles are tight or nice and relaxed?
Probably nice and relaxed.
Absolutely. Now, in addition, I know you didn't come in for this, but in addition, you've got some sleep problems and you've got some high blood pressure. So let me ask you, if your brain thinks the fire alarm is always going off and is always in stress mode, what's going to happen to your blood pressure?
It's probably going to go up.
It's going to go up. And if you never get away from that stress, is it ever going to come down?
I would hope not. I mean, probably not.
It's not. It's going to stay up, right? In addition, you're not sleeping very well. Let me ask you, if your brain thinks the fire alarm is going off, does it want to sleep?
No, probably not.
No, it doesn't. So what I think is going on here, Doc, is you have a brain and nervous system communication issue, right? Brain-body communication issue. And so what I'd like to do is go ahead and again, I'm going to check out your low back pain for sure, but I'm guessing this, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if there is a brain problem that could be causing all these things, let me ask you this. Do you want to just cover it up? Do you just want to continue to cover it up with medications or ignore it? Or do you want to actually get to the foundation of the cause or the cause?
I want to figure out how to fix it. I didn't even know you guys could do that.
Absolutely. So let's do this. Let's go check out your back pain for sure. We're going to do some tests on that. But in addition, we're going to check out your brain, see how well it's functioning. How's that sound?
Sounds cool.
So that's kind of the approach.
I love the example. I think that's easy to follow. I think someone listening to this could probably grab onto that and not call it their own, but go and do the same thing tomorrow and practice. And I love that we're taking it away from the pain. My question, and I get that this is like a what color should the napkins be at a dinner question. It's pretty basic, but also walk me through the connection of his brain problem, because I see where you identified, yeah, my brain's not regulating. It's not recognizing the stressor, or the stressor's still there. What's the next step in that? Is it identifying based upon x-rays? Is it identifying, what other testing are you doing? And keep walking me through the connection.
Here's what I found is the posture app was the only thing I could afford at the time was working. But here was the deal. And believe it or not, when you look at my numbers, 0 to 500, my acceptance rate was 20%. 20%. So you imagine how many people I had to see in order to reach that, right? At a 20% acceptance rate.
You mean
it's crazy.
From day one to signing a care plan?
Yeah. My minimum care plan, I said to myself at this point, like minimum, they have to accept a 6-month long care plan. Otherwise, I send them down the street, they can go somewhere else. They're not coming here. So 20%. But what happened was we started getting into more technology. I used the Insight for a little bit. That actually made it worse. And the reason, guys, that made it worse, and a lot of people don't understand this, is that acceptance rate I'm talking about is because visual perception is 43 times faster than auditory perception. And so this comes down to taking x-rays, it comes down to the Insight, which is scanning the spine, right? I'm focused on the spine. So I'm trying to talk brain, but I'm showing spine. Visual perception is 43 times faster. A picture's worth 1,000 words. So the connection was never really made, right? And so then we got rid of that. And then we moved to something called the NeuroInfinity, which actually measured the brain. We actually put leads on their brain to measure EEG. We measure their heart rate, their respiration rate, their skin conductance, their hand temperature. We measure their muscle tension, but we do it during stress and then during recovery. But what happens is this: if I'm calling myself a brain doctor, a brain-based chiropractor, but I'm measuring the spine, there's disconnect, right? Whether consciously or subconsciously, it's going to affect my acceptance. It's going to accept my ability to keep patients for long term, et cetera. So what happened was when we started putting those leads on people's heads, I would actually have people say, wow, you're actually measuring my brain. Like, this is amazing. And so it automatically switched their perception of me being a back doctor or a pain doctor to being a brain doctor just by being able to measure the brain. And then my acceptance rates went up to 97%, minimum 6-month care plan, 100% cash.
Those are legit numbers. Question on the NeuroInfinity. Let's dive in and talk about that for a minute, because I know that's still one of the things you do, correct? And that's kind of like your flagship thing is the NeuroInfinity. So walk me through, and you just mentioned some of the things that you're testing, but talk to me like I have no freaking clue what you're talking about. Like, and how does this functionally work? How long is this taking? Is your staff doing it? They're putting these leads on someone's head. When you say stress versus not stress, are they going to like do 20 burpees and then put it on? And then they got to go lay on a couch and then put it on? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah. So first, to explain in layman's terms, like, let me ask you something. If you're under stress, if your brain thinks the fire alarm is going off, what should happen to your heart rate?
Should go up.
And then when there's no more fire alarm and we come back into the building 10, 15 minutes later, relaxed, what should happen to your heart rate?
Should go down.
Question is, do you know if that actually happens?
I haven't checked it.
We don't know. So let's start with the first step. Let's see if it's actually working like it should. That's exactly what we're going to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to hook up your brain on what called EEG leads. We're going to measure brain waves. At the same time, we're going to measure your heart rate. We're going to measure your breathing rate. We're going to measure how much you're sweating. We're going to measure muscle tension. And then what we're going to do is it's going to take us about 15 minutes. It's totally pain-free, non-invasive. And what we're going to do during that 15 minutes is we're going to take you through a stress, for example, a math test. Again, your brain doesn't know the difference between a math stress or a fire alarm stress or a bear chasing you stress. So your heart rate should still go up. And then afterwards, we're going to have you close your eyes and relax. See if you can calm down. Let's see if your heart rate actually lowers. Sound good? Like, that's it, right? And so the stressors are for adults, a math test, number one. Actually do eyes open first and then eyes closed. Just go from eyes open, eyes closed. We reduce the stress, right? Because we filter out the visual perception, right? So the brain should calm down. Just go from eyes open to eyes closed. Then we take them through a math test, 30 seconds. Close your eyes, relax, 30 seconds. And then we go to an emotional sounds stress test, which is sounds like a dentist drill or a dog barking or kids crying, any of these emotional stressors. And then close your eyes, relax afterwards. We turn off the sounds. Let's let you calm down. And then the third stress is a breathing test, like a physical stress, where we actually have them intentionally slow their breathing and then see what happens after that to see if they can recover from that. So that has more to do with a physical stress. And it's crazy, Doc, the stuff that we see with people. I'll just give you an example. We had a 53-year-old chiropractor, was based on the insight. I'm not bashing insight, so don't get me wrong, everybody, but based on his insight scan, his nervous system was working fine. Okay. He was doing high intensity interval training regularly. His blood pressure was 120/60. His resting pulse was like 63 beats per minute. Healthy, right? He comes in for a test. We do this neuroaffinity test. It's called a brain scan. We call it a brain scan. And so what happens is we take him through this test. What happened during the breathing test is his heart rate sped up like it should, but then after we told him to breathe regular, guess his heart rate went even higher. So I don't remember the exact numbers, but let's say during the breathing test, his heart rate jumped to like 80 beats per minute. And then afterwards, breathe normal, his heartbeat went from 80 to 84 beats per minute. Something's wrong there, right? I said, Doc, this is not right. So your brain and nervous system's not down regulated. I said, you shouldn't be doing high intensity interval training right now because it's too intense for you. You can't down regulate. Let's get your brain and nervous system to regulate properly first, and then you can go back to that, right? So I need you to stop doing that. I need you to do yoga. I need you to do Tai Chi, stuff that's going to help your nervous system down regulate. He said, no, I'm fine. I'm healthy. Everything's fine, right? I see him a year later at another conference. I said, Doc, did you make any of those changes? He said, no. 3 weeks later, we found out he died of a heart attack in the middle of a workout.
Oh, wow.
Because his brain and nervous system wasn't down regulated. He thought it was. He thought he was fine, but in actuality, it wasn't, right?
So practical questions there. This is all being like read out on the computer screen so they can see it, I'm assuming, or your staff can show it to them. Then they start getting adjusted. And how often do you see the ability to regulate actually improve? And is there ever times where like you feel like a person's spine is getting better? You've delivered great adjustments. Everything's been awesome, because I've used some of these scans and a person has no more headaches. They're sleeping really well. Digestion's better. I can't feel a damn subluxation of their spine, and the scan says they're worse. So does the Neuroinfinity ever show you what you don't want to see? Like transparency.
Yeah. This is the great thing about this is, and again, I'm not bashing other technology because there's some validity to it, obviously, but what I find is some false readings once in a while. And what we find with the Neuroinfinity is, listen, either their heartbeat goes up when they're under stress and it goes down when they're relaxed, or it doesn't. Like, there's no in-betweens, right? And so, yeah, I can take x-rays, I can see postures improving, great. But does that necessarily equate to their brain and nervous system is regulating like it should? And the answer is, we don't know unless we're measuring it, right?
How often do you check the Neuroinfinity? How often is that a progress eval type of situation?
So what I recommend for docs, we start with the first scan on the first visit, and then at 6 weeks, we reevaluate, make sure we're moving in the right direction, make sure we're giving the right type of adjustment, make sure the lifestyle changes are happening the way they should, right? Because in my experience, oftentimes, especially when we're talking with someone with dementia or severe anxiety, oftentimes it takes more than just the adjustment, guys. The adjustment's amazing. But what I found was that when I was just doing adjustments, 2 years later, people were getting they still had high blood pressure. They still had whatever, right? But when I started implementing lifestyle changes, all of a sudden everything changed, right? It was amazing.
Well, a lot, and part of this conversation is our forefathers in chiropractic weren't dealing with the same level of stimuli, glyphosate, crappy food. I mean, our patients have so much more, in a sense, of traumas and toxins and thoughts that they never had back in BJ and Clarence's day.
Well, that's what I say to docs. I say, listen, sometimes a high force manual adjustment is too stimulating for the nervous system. And they come back and they say, well, Petey did that or BJ did that in the 50s. I said, yeah, but the level of stress in the 50s is way different than the level of stress today. Like there's no comparison, right?
One more question on this, on the neuroinfinity thing, because you said something to the effect of need to make sure that we're doing the right adjustment. Are you basing the adjustment on a stimuli of parasympathetic versus sympathetic, or are you ever addressing that aspect of it?
Yeah, we're addressing that aspect based on what shows up on their brain scan, right? If they're high beta and low theta, then we know we need to downregulate. And what we know is high force manual adjustments actually stimulate beta, which is fine in the short term. But if they can't downregulate, they can't bring beta down and increase theta and alpha. Long term, they're screwing things up. And so what we need to do is more of a low force technique that we know. Again, we've done this during adjustments. We can actually measure the brain during the adjustments to see what happens to their brain waves. And so we know low force adjustments will help stimulate theta and alpha brain waves and help lower beta brain waves.
So I don't even know. And if I don't know, I'm assuming that there's at least one other doc listening that doesn't know. Can you explain beta, alpha, theta? Because I've heard of them, probably learned them in school, but I got recollection now.
Yeah, beta, those are brain waves that basically tell you. So most people heard of delta brain waves, right? Delta, when you have delta sleep, that's your delta brain wave that's working the most, right? Because you're in a deep sleep. Well, as we come out of delta, we move into what we call theta. Theta is your light sleep brain wave, but it's also your healing brain wave. Alpha is your hypnotic brain wave. And so you can see we go from delta, theta, and we start going up and up and up till we hit beta. Beta is your awake brain wave, also called your stress brain wave. And so people that have high anxiety, people that are not able to downregulate, they're under too much stress, they have high beta brain waves, right? And which is a sign that, and basically that's what we do is we use brain waves to help us determine what's going on with this person's brain, right? And so we can see based on that reading what's happening. And usually, almost always, that's associated with what's going on physiologically with their heart rate and their respiration rate and their skin conductance, et cetera.
If somebody is stuck in more of a beta and that they're kind of in that anxiety type of thing, would you walk me through, like, this is not about, I'm not picking on techniques and you probably do something different than I do. And so it's not about who's right with adjustments, because we have a lot of chiropractors who listen to this, but what are you doing to address that, like technique wise and or part of the spine wise?
Well, what I think we got to come back to, and yeah, all the techniques work. And this is where Dr. Barwell came in. He's the one that invented the neuroinfinity. Was he came back and said, wait, this doesn't make sense, right? Like that technique works, but sometimes that technique doesn't work. Sometimes that technique doesn't work, right? They're all different. So what does it come down to? And you've got to look at what is it doing to the brain, right? What is the specific technique doing to the brain, right? So we know some techniques stimulate beta, which in some cases we see people come in with low beta, right? If they're depressed, chances are they're low beta, they're high theta, high alpha. We've got to reverse that. So we want a more stimulating adjustment that's going to stimulate beta, right? But we know some techniques actually lower beta and increase theta and alpha.
You're doing good. You're answering the question, but you haven't quite answered the question yet. So that as far as part of the spine, the upper cervical area and the sacrum is more parasympathetic. Your lower cervicals, thoracics, lumbar spine is more sympathetic. So neurologically, talk to me about, like, where would you want to tap in if you want to bring someone out of that beta?
So we want to focus on not only the intensity of the adjustment, but also the area of the spine, 100%. Yep. Not always. Sometimes you can just do the intensity, but yeah, if someone's super high beta and overstressed, I'm going to try to stay away from the thoracic spine as much as possible, right?
Got it. So then when we say bring down the adjustment, do you guys ever do, I mean, are you ever just literally I'm not minimizing muscle work in the right spot, but are you ever just like literally rubbing suboccipitals to stimulate mechanoreceptive input to bring down the sympathetic tone?
Yeah, in fact, I had a lady. She was diagnosed with stage 5 lung cancer. She had 6 months to live. Right? She couldn't handle even an instrument adjustment. She couldn't handle. Basically, the adjustment was like I would do with a little baby, right? Thumb, pressure there, and that was it. That's all she could handle.
I don't know how to say this. I feel like I'm very good at moving a bone. I pride myself in the ability to adjust what a lot of chiropractors maybe can't get to move, or it's very comfortable in patients. There is a wow factor and a holy shit, that was a big type of an adjustment. I'm understanding in this conversation, and I'm very open to adapt and change. Maybe there's a time and place where that's not even, I'm not the best chiropractor for that person, or I've got to change my technique. So I appreciate the conversation, and my hope is that there's other chiropractors that are willing to go, oh, hey, maybe I need to modify something. Maybe I need to add a new technique or change to what I'm doing so I can address that old lady that all I have to do is literally rub behind her ear, whisper sweet nothings to her, and she's going to get better, you know?
Yeah. What we tell docs is, listen, you need to have a handful of tools in your tool bag, basically, right? Multiple techniques, some high force, some low force, some instruments, some whatever, and have a number of things.
I ask a question in my interviews with docs on the show a lot, and it's do you have any advice for the younger you? Like, if you could go back, I feel like now that I understand your story more, I almost know what the answer would be. So tell me if I'm wrong, but if you could go back to you starting practice for you in school, you would say, hey, listen, make it about the brain, not the pain. Here's the secret to making it about a neurological practice, and everybody's going to be attracted to that. Is there anything else that you would tell the younger you, AKA something you might want to tell a student or a new doc coming into practice right now?
Be open, right? Be open to, and that's how I usually start my workshops. I mean, let's set the intention here. Let's be open, right? Right now, I'm helping people all over the world reverse dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, and more. And the thing that I tell people is, listen, just be like, do you know everything in the world? No, you don't. Great. You got a doctorate. Great. You went through school. But that doesn't mean what I'm saying is wrong. And doesn't mean like 3 years from now, what I'm saying is right. Like, we don't know. Just be open to new ideas, new possibilities. And I think one of the most important things is stop limiting yourself in your own mind. That's huge.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier as far as like seeing what other people are doing in regard to volume or reaching people around the world. Because something you just mentioned, we don't have to dive into it, but there are chiropractors that are literally helping people in other countries right now because of the technology that we have. And that's something that no one ever would have thought was possible before. Yeah. So there's a lot of really cool stuff. And something else you said earlier in this interview was you have a degree in chiropractic, which kind of limits you and like that's all you can really do. At least that's what you thought. And that's why you started selling Kirby vacuums. And again, praise God, you started selling Kirby vacuums because now you can sell chiropractic like a ninja. But there's so much that we can do as chiropractors. So and I'm not saying we need to abort mission on adjusting the spine, but let's bring in a neuro infinity and start doing some different testing. Let's bring on some new objective testing. Let's start making more videos online and sharing the principle of chiropractic with people in different countries that have never heard of this, so that some kid in some other country goes, dude, I want to be a chiropractor. This sounds freaking cool.
Yeah, 100%, man. It baffles my mind how many chiropractors are so focused on pain, and then they're doing videos on pain and whatever else, and then they can't figure out why people don't want to stay longer after their pain is gone,
I did my last interview I did with Dr. Ben Lerner, and we were talking about how chiropractors back in the day, back in the Clarence Gonstead era, it wasn't about getting patients. It was about, how do I become the leader of my town and take over the world? Because chiropractors should be at the forefront of everything, not just healthcare. And by elevating that mindset to such a high level, you automatically attract a shit ton of new patients. Like, that's just like a byproduct of being that guy.
Absolutely.
Whereas, and to your point, chiropractors are so focused on getting rid of pain. Like, of course you haven't seen a miracle in your office in the last few months. You're just excited about back pain going away. I want to inspire chiropractors that listen to this show to be walking into your clinic expecting the blind to see, the deaf to hear, and the lame to walk. Like, that's what we should be. That's how we roll. You know what I mean?
That's it. Awesome.
So, well, I got two more things. Number one is, if you could go back and kick it with a chiropractor that's no longer alive, like, I'm going to have more for dinner, or you're going to go shadow his practice, who pops out as first in your mind as the OG that you want to hang out with?
I think Dr. Fred Bard, she had he knew about the neuroinfinity before he passed, and he had done a couple things on it, and it was pretty insightful. I think he was open. I think obviously, BJ was testing. I mean, he had instrumentation, right? Underground, he had to do it because of the radio station. He was measuring this stuff, right? So I think, we were moving in that direction, and then we got derailed with the whole pain thing. And it was, yeah. So I think either of those docs.
You know what's really cool is everybody I've interviewed so far, no one's had the same answer. And so I would you give me one or two random facts or stats or something about Fred Barge that maybe our audience doesn't know? Because you got to also think about people may be listening to this show in 2036 and be going, who the hell is Clarence Gonstead? Right. So the guys like my age group, your age group, and then there's we're already getting generations beyond the guys that really paved the way for you and I. So what is it about Fred Barge that you would want to share with someone that's never even heard the name?
Obviously his successes speak for themselves. And so, you asked about numbers, but I think this goes for a lot of those chiropractors was they were open, right, to new ideas, and they were open to new concepts and new thoughts. And I don't know that they were necessarily just stuck on just bone out of place, placing pressure on a nerve. They were open to the next thing, right? And I think that's where a lot of chiropractors get caught up in that, wait a second, this is all based on, bone out of place, placing pressure on the nerve. And they're not open to the next thing. Like, wait a second, this is a whole brain model, right? That we're dealing with, right? And so open your mind, man. And I think that's one of the things that I really value in a lot of those other chiropractors, especially Dr. Fred and VJ and some of the others.
Awesome, bro. Man, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks for being with me. Is there anything at some point someone's hearing this, they want to come watch you speak on stage, they want to maybe come work at your office, they want to plug in, they want to come shadow. How do people find you? And if there's a doc that wants to come shadow, where's your practice at? Talk to me about that a little bit.
I'm in Maine. You can find me at drclintsteele.com. That's more my public-facing website, drclintsteele.com. From a practice standpoint, it's brainbasedhealthsolutions.com. Brainbasedhs.com stands for Brain-Based Health Solutions.
Cool. Hey, thanks for being on the show today, Doc. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Doc. Appreciate you, man.